Thank you. As mentioned, I do have a master's degree in public history from UNA. I'm originally from Hazel Green and still live there, but I did work at Belmont for almost a year, so I'm really glad to be back here today. I have been researching and practicing gravestone cleaning for about 8 years now. And so my goal with this presentation is to give you an overview of the basic do's and don'ts of cemetery and gravestone cleaning and preservation. And I'll also mention here that there's a lot to cover, so if you do have questions, just make a note of those and we'll get to questions at the end. Before we get started, I wanted to share what has become one of my favorite quotes with you. It is, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. So if during this presentation you realize that you've been cleaning cemeteries and gravestones incorrectly, it's okay. Don't panic. Just do better from here on out. Before you begin, I do encourage you to look at the Alabama Historical Commission's cemetery program page. This details cemetery cleanup projects. They've got state laws regarding cemeteries, permit requirements for major work cleaning overgrown cemeteries, and for repairing damaged gravestones. There are also preservation best practices on this site and the application for the cemetery register. This is a 4-page application that you complete along with attachments, and all of that gets sent to the AHC for documentation. You can also see a list of the cemeteries that have already been registered, so you're not re-registering something that's already been done. Also, before you begin, check out the Cemetery Conservators for United Standards website. This website includes a wealth of information on cemetery preservation. The creators of the site have taken standards from the experts in preservation and gathered all of that expert advice into one place. So it's a great website. They also have step-by-step guides for cleaning cemeteries and cleaning gravestones, so definitely check them out. Their motto is do no harm. You also need to contact the property owner. Now, this is for if you're looking at a cemetery in a rural location, sort of those abandoned cemeteries. You do want to contact the property owner. So you can do that through your county tax assessor's office. I know Madison County has a really great tax assessor's map where you can go in and look at each property owner. So definitely check with your tax assessor's office before you go on to potentially trespassing on someone's property. This is Alabama. We care about our property rights here. So definitely look for an owner. Mm-hmm.
Just in general,
Yeah, I definitely recommend contacting a property owner, a cemetery caretaker, before you go on to any cemetery, because you don't want to ruffle any feathers. So definitely look for a property owner or cemetery caretaker. So the documentation of the process of cleaning a cemetery is important. So remember that you will need to take photographs for each step of the process. If you're doing major work with a permit, like through the AHC, you're going to have to send in photographs of your progress. So be sure and take pictures before you get started cleaning a cemetery, while you're cleaning, and then after you've completed the project. As you're beginning to clean an overgrown cemetery, be sure and flag all gravestones as you find them. You definitely want to make note of where everything is so that when you're cutting down the vegetation, you don't accidentally damage a gravestone. You want to avoid heavy equipment, and that does include lawnmowers, especially until you get to the point where you know where any fallen gravestones might be. You don't want to drive through with a lawnmower and then again damage any fallen stones. Historic plants and flowers can be an indication of where your graves are. So if you're cutting down an overgrown cemetery and you find daffodils or lilac, leave those alone, cut around those, because that can be an indication of a burial. And then another thing to keep in mind as you're cleaning an overgrown cemetery, don't use herbicides like Roundup. That can damage the gravestones. And then if you clean up a large pile of trash or fallen trees, don't burn those in the cemetery, because the soot and ash can discolor gravestones. So keep that in mind. Okay. This is an example of a historic planting, like I mentioned. Vinca minor, also known as periwinkle or cemetery vine, can be very beneficial to a cemetery. It can slow major growth of vegetation, and it does not climb, so it's not going to damage the stones. This was historically planted in cemeteries, so if you find it, you should try to promote that regrowth and not harm it in any way. Sometimes, like I was saying, daffodils, lilacs, lilies, or yucca are the only indication that you have a grave there. So if you find it as you're cleaning, leave it there. And you'll find that once you get the grass and the weeds cut down, those will really start to regrow for you. And like I said, sometimes that's all you get. The gravestone is gone, it's disappeared, it's been damaged, so all you have left are the flowers. If you do decide to register a cemetery with the state, you have to complete an application. It's found on the AHC website. And in addition to the 4-page application, you also need to include these attachments. The historical narrative, you're going to want to research the church, the community, the family, and then much of that research can be done at your local library or archive, or through sites like Find a Grave, Ancestry, Family Search. Just remember to double check any of that information you find and verify that you've got the correct information. The list of graves is strongly encouraged, but you're not required to recreate a list of graves if one exists elsewhere. If you find it in a historic book, if you find it on Find a Grave, you can reuse that list and put it in your application and cite where you got that. You do want to give an indication of the location or order of the graves. So you don't want to just list everybody's name in alphabetical order. You do want to mark where they were buried. So ideally, you should include a transcription of each gravestone. Again, in a large cemetery, that's probably not going to be practical, but you should try to do that when you can. And photographs are the same way. You should photograph each side of each monument, but if you're in a large cemetery, that's not going to be practical to turn into the AHC. So for big cemeteries, you're going to want to take photos of all sides of the cemetery, stand in each corner and get the big picture of the cemetery, and then include types of monuments, people that are held a position in the town, people that you can tell their history. You would include their monuments as well. So in small cemeteries, again, you would photograph each monument and include that in the application. You also will need a good quality map showing the cemetery's location, and a site map of the layout of the graves is, if possible. For examples of how to complete or what a complete application looks like, you can look at the AHC map. They have a map on their website that shows every cemetery that's been registered, and you can open the PDF of the application and look at at those for examples. If you're registering a large cemetery, again, you might not be able to photograph each stone. So get a good mix of photos, a good mix of monuments, different types, different makers' marks. Try to link your narrative to the photographs and the photographs to the list of graves. The easiest way to do that is to number the monument in the picture, number the monument on the list of graves, number the monument on the map, so that at each of those elements you can see which monument you're talking about. Also, be inclusive when writing about individuals. Include minorities, women, preachers, doctors, skilled laborers, and people who died in significant events like a flu outbreak, or in our case, tornado outbreak. This is Alabama, so be inclusive. This picture is Maud Lindsay, who was an author and educator and ran the first free kindergarten in the state. Robert Abernathy was a doctor from Tuscumbia. And then Judith McCraw Winston was killed in her home in the 1874 tornado outbreak that devastated Tuscumbia. So all of those would be people that you could include, talk a little bit about them in the narrative, and include their monuments. And again, put a variety of the monument types. So the biggest monuments, the most interesting carvings. If you find makers' marks, include those. Just give a good sampling of what is present in the cemetery. Photographs are an extremely important part of the application. That being said, sometimes it is easier to read the monument if it is clean. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about cleaning the monuments. Before you clean a monument, you should get permission to do so from a descendant of the person who the monument belonged to, the cemetery superintendent or sexton, or the town or county, and that's the order of priority. Start with those descendants first. Now, this can be difficult in small rural cemeteries, but it is an important step of the process, and we should make our best effort to do this. People do get very sensitive about their ancestors' gravestones, so you want to be sensitive to that. It's important to know what you hope to achieve by cleaning a monument and have realistic expectations from the beginning. We don't really restore gravestones. Restoration is returning an item to its former position or condition. On the other hand, preservation involves keeping an object from destruction without irredeemably altering or changing it. With gravestones, restoration is nearly impossible. The stone has been exposed to the elements, and it is never going to look the way it did 50 or 100 years ago. And an attempt to reverse all aspects of the environment it's going to be damaging to the stone in the long run. So our biggest goal should be to preserve the stones and help ensure that they are readable now and for generations to come. So how does cleaning a stone help preserve it? Well, cleaning removes the harmful elements. Things like soot, ash, dirt, and even pollen can stain a gravestone. And biological growth can be very damaging to a stone. Things like moss attached to a stone will hold water, which can freeze in the winter and create small cracks in the stone, which will get larger over time. And the fact that you have moss there on the stone means that the stone is going to hold more water, which will promote more growth. So it's a cyclical issue. So cleaning is helpful to the stone, but it's important to use methods which do no harm in order to preserve the stone for as long as possible. Some things to know before you head to the cemetery: monuments are extremely heavy, and you should never attempt to lift one or move one without the proper equipment. Even the small ones are extremely heavy, so keep that in mind. Don't attempt to clean a monument in freezing temperatures. If it's going to drop below freezing in 48 hours, just don't do it. Again, that stone, when that stone is wet, the water freezes and that creates tiny fractures in the stone. In the heat, you're going to want to either shade the stone, or the easiest way is to set the water out and let it warm up so that you're not pouring cold water onto a hot stone. Those extreme temperature changes again fracture the stone. Of course, we can't control the weather, and naturally it is going to rain and in freezing weather, but we can reduce the impact we have on the stones by not cleaning in freezing temperatures. You're always going to want to inspect a stone first. If you tap on it with your knuckles and it sounds hollow, then that means the stone is separating. And if you run your hand across it and it feels grainy or sugary, that is called sugaring. And so you're not going to want to clean those. Do a spot test on the back and make sure that the stone is not sugaring or flaking. If there is any separating, sugaring, flaking, cracks, any sort of damage that you see, don't clean it. Consult a professional at that point. The goal is to use the least invasive methods possible. These methods should never be used. Household cleaners can cause major damage to stones over time, so you want to use a cleaning agent that is as close to pH neutral as possible, and we will talk about that and make specific recommendations. Pressure washing, if done, should only be done by professional preservationists, not professional pressure washers. There is a difference, so keep that in mind. Any mechanical methods like the ones mentioned here at the bottom should not be used. They damage the stone. You may not see the damage immediately, but it is there. So you want to keep in mind that stone exposed to the elements over time builds up a protective layer, much like the enamel of your teeth. Once that protective layer is gone, the stone will deteriorate more easily. So we want to clean the harmful matter off of the stone without damaging that protective layer. This image came from the Cemetery Conservators for United Standards website. Bleach is at the top of the list of damaging products, mostly due to its sodium content. The salts soak into the stone and break down its molecular structure from within. Ammonia has also been used for generations as a gravestone cleaner, but ammonia is also commonly used in fertilizer. So it has been shown to increase biological growth over time, which when you think about it makes sense. So we want to avoid that as well. These images also came from the Cemetery Conservators website. The stone in the two pictures on the right was legible before treatment and looked clean and white after treatment. But with the protective layer stripped from the stone, it quickly deteriorated. So just in a couple of years, the stone is now unreadable. So now that you know what not to do, let's talk about what you should use. The recommended materials are Orvis paste, D2 biological cleaner, soft or natural bristle brushes, tongue depressors or plastic scrapers, and lots of clean water. There is a product called Wet and Forget that is advertised to clean gravestones, but it has not been tested as thoroughly as D2 and Orvis have been, so we just don't know yet what the long-term effects of that are going to be. And I wanted to give you some basic information and strategies for using the two recommended cleaners. Orvis paste is pretty easy to find and is very affordable. A little goes a long way. You dilute this, basically a spoonful or two to a spray bottle of water. And it's been used for years as a horse or pet shampoo and to clean vintage quilts. So if it's safe enough to use on grandma's quilt, it is okay. And what Orvis does is it removes the dirt and grime from the stone and makes it easier for D2 to do its job. And how to use Orvis, I'm going to just breeze through this because then there's going to be a video after. So yeah, you dilute it, wet the stone, and then spray Orvis directly onto it. Scrub it gently with a brush, and then rinse it thoroughly. Now, if you show up and your stone is covered in moss, that really needs to be scraped off before you clean it, before you scrub it. So you're going to want to soak the stone and then scrape it with a plastic scraper, and I will show you a video of that. But just remember that a lot of times Orvis is your first step, so you don't want to over scrub and over clean with Orvis because you're going to clean again. So just keep that in mind.
We have a lot of biological growth. We've got some moss-like material growing here. You can see where I've scraped here. We're just going to wet it down completely, let it soak in with water, and then you use your plastic scraper and just scrape gently, and it comes right off. That's all there is to it. And then you will proceed with cleaning as normal. After you scrape off any biological growth, you will want to re-wet the stone completely with clean water. A good pump sprayer is a great investment for this. You'll want to use a sprayer that uses a gentle stream. In this case, I used a battery-operated sprayer. Using something like this saves your strength for the actual scrubbing. So you wet the entire surface of the stone, then apply a mixture of Orvis paste and water. Again, you dilute Orvis paste. I usually use a few spoonsful for a small pump sprayer and mix it well. So spray the Orvis water on the entire surface of the stone, then scrub gently with a clean, wet brush. As you're scrubbing, you'll want to keep a small bucket of clean water nearby. This will allow you to dip your brush and keep it wet the entire time. Never scrub a stone with a dry brush. Orvis produces a gentle lather, which you'll see as you scrub. Scrub gently. Remember, this is basically the first step. And again, keep the stone wet as you go. Be sure to keep a steady hand on the stone as you scrub. You don't want to put your weight on the stone or lean on the stone, but you do want to keep your hand there to keep it from moving in any way. Remember, Orvis is an optional step. This is best for removing grass, pollen, dirt, but it's not going to remove biological growth. So if you're cleaning a modern, slick granite stone that just has some dirt or pollen on it, you may want to do only an Orvis scrub and save your D2 for biological growth. When you're finished, rinse the stone well with clean water. You remember, a lot of times you'll follow this up with a D2 scrub, so you want to rinse off any Orvis as well as any dirt or pollen you may have loosened up as you scrubbed. Once you have rinsed it thoroughly, you are ready to move on to the D2 step in the process.
To read the specifics about D2, you can visit the D2 website. You can find D2 for sale from many different websites, including Amazon. It is not cheap, but a little goes a long way. And you can dilute this, but you don't have to, and you shouldn't dilute this more than 50%. This is what's used by the Park Service, the National Park Service, to clean historic monuments across the country. There are two methods for using D2, the immediate results method or the no scrub, no rinse method. And again, I'm just going to breeze through this because there is another video after. If you can't scrub or don't want to scrub, you can just spray D2 and walk away. That's the no scrub, no rinse method, and that will help. But to use the D2, you're just going to spray it with D2 and let that sit for 10 to 15 minutes, and then scrub gently with a wet brush just like you did with the Orvis. When you're finished, rinse it completely clean and then spray one more coat of D2 and walk away. That's it. So again, there are two methods, and you can do the no scrub, no rinse method as a pre-cleaning treatment for a stone that's really, really bad. Spray it 6 weeks before and then come back and scrub it, and that'll help make it easier on you. So we've got another video.
For the D2 scrub, spray D2 and of that 15-minute period. So after you have allowed D2 to dry for 10 to 15 minutes, re-wet the stone with clean water. Then you will scrub the stone in the same way you did when you scrubbed with Orvis paste. Keep your brush wet, keep the stone wet as you go. Use a smaller brush in the inscriptions and carvings to clear any growth from inside the lettering. Scrub gently in a circular motion. You don't need to scrub so hard that you hurt yourself or damage the stone. Also remember, this does not have to be perfect. D2 will continue to work over time, so don't stress about any missed spots you may see or any stubborn growth that you may not be able to clear immediately. When you finish scrubbing, rinse the stone completely with clean water. You don't want to leave any of the dirt you have scrubbed loose on the stone because it will lead to a restaining of the stone. So be sure to rinse thoroughly. This will take a lot of water, so always bring extra with you. If you are in a rural cemetery with no water access, you may want to save a collection of milk jugs and fill them with water for this. Once the stone is completely rinsed, you can move on to the last step in the process. Cemetery, check the forecast. If it's not forecast to rain within 12 hours, you want to apply one last coat of D2 to dry, and we're going to do that now. So again, you're just going to completely soak it down with D2. And that is just going to get anything that we missed, anything that was stubborn that we didn't want to scrub too hard. That D2 will continue to work over time, cleaning that stone. So yeah, just do a good last coat, especially in the inscriptions and any carvings where water will build up. And that's it. You are done.
Do not panic. The first time I cleaned a marble gravestone with D2, I panicked. There is a phenomenon called the D2 blush. When you're cleaning marble stones, sometimes the D2 causes a color change. It can be bright green, bright orange, Alabama red. Alabama dirt red, it's very scary. So just keep in mind that that is something that can happen. What it is it's a sign that the biological growth is dying. So it's actually doing what you want it to do, but it can be a little scary. It is temporary, so usually within 2 to 3 days, that discoloration is gone.
Talk about the D2 blush. This is what we mean. These have just been sprayed with D2, and you can see they are turning sort of a bright red, like a bright rusty red. It's an interesting color. These are marble. You'll see different colors. Some turn the bright orange, bright red. Some turn a bright green. Some don't blush much at all, like this one. These have sort of almost a purplish hue. It's interesting. And like I said, some don't blush at all. They blush in different colors, but it's just a sign that the D2 is killing the biological growth. Some you'll see bright green, like at the bottom here, but it's just a sign that the product is working. It's doing what we want. So this is a good thing.
This was the first marble stone that I cleaned, and that's what color it turned, and that's about when I started panicking. This I went back 2 days later, and you couldn't tell that it was discolored. And as you can see, over time, the stone continues to whiten and brighten. The biological growth dies off and leaves a brighter, cleaner surface. After cleaning and rinsing, and then leaving that last coat of D2 to dry, you're finished. Now you just have to wait for the final results. Be patient. Again, D2 continues to work over time, killing more biological growth. So take a picture before you clean, take one after, go back and take another picture a few weeks later, a few months later, a year later, and you should see a progression of improvement. For annual maintenance, it is recommended by some preservationists to limit the scrubbing cleanings to once every 10 years. So if you have any sort of maintenance required in between, it should be a no scrub, no rinse spray, or it should be a light spot cleaning. Just keep in mind, every time you scrub, you are risking removing tiny particles of stone. So just try not to over clean. These are some before and after examples, and you can see it really does make a big difference. Again, this was the one that scared me. This was my 3-time great-grandmother's stone. And when I drive by the cemetery, I can tell from the road which one is hers because it's the white one in the old section. So I love seeing this one. Horizontal surfaces collect water, and therefore they collect biological matter more easily, and they can be more difficult to clean. So I cleaned the one with the Patriot marker. This is Captain Winston, Anthony Winston. He was a captain, right? Okay. This is Captain Winston's stone. I cleaned his after doing a no scrub, no rinse spray 6 weeks before. When I cleaned his wife's, it was so hard to clean that I decided to just spray Captain Winston's and come back in 6 weeks and clean it. And it made it much easier. So I do recommend that for difficult surfaces. Do that pre-cleaning step. You can also see that these stones didn't turn that bright white that the marble does. And you can see one of the marble infant stones in the background. So different types of stone are going to clean differently, and they're going to look different, and that's okay. They're not all going to be bright white. They weren't meant to be bright white. So keep that in mind, that your goal is not to get bright white out of every stone. This is before any treatment, and you can see the black around all the carvings, and at the bottom, this is likely a combination of things like road pollution and mold and mildew. These three are at Maple Hill over in Huntsville. And this is after about 2 years. So they're still looking pretty good after 2 years. You can also see the large Monroe stone was pressure washed before I could get to it. It made me really sad. And you can also see that they missed spots. And after 2 years, you've got a lot of restaining on that large stone. So just, why risk the damage that pressure washing can do when D2 does such a better job anyway? So stay away from pressure washers. I'll stop now. Okay, the first image here is after one no scrub, no rinse application and about 6 weeks. And at that point, we could actually read the stone, and we discovered it was a child that at the time I was not aware of, and I didn't know anybody else that was aware of it either. So just that one application and 6 weeks made this readable, which is great.
And that's the oldest baby right after 1826.
Mm-hmm. So then,
Wow, that's really old.
yeah. So the next two images were after scrubbing. So if you don't want to spend the money, or you don't want to spend the time scrubbing, or you don't have the strength to scrub, just spraying D2 and walking away is going to help a lot. Now with one like this where it's completely covered in biological matter, you do want to come back 6 weeks later and spray it again. If you're not going to scrub it, give it that second spray of D2 to kind of help. You can also see the difference the position of the sun makes in a photograph. So when you're photographing gravestones, either take the picture with the sun at your back or under full cloud cover, and those are going to give you the best results. The one on the left was with the sun behind me, and the one over on the right was on a completely cloudy day. And those are the two that you can actually read. So just keep that in mind. You also want to use reflective light to cast shadows and make the stones easier to photograph. You can use a car sunshade or a big mirror for that, but please, please, please don't add any substance to the stone just to take a photograph. And that does include chalk and flour and what's the other one that's used? Shaving cream. So please don't add those to the stone. They may seem harmless, but they do include some chemicals that would surprise you. And they're also incredibly difficult to rinse completely. And so the fact that there's a substance there will again promote biological growth. So use reflective light instead of adding things to the stone. And there's a video of an example of that.
I get asked a lot about photographing the gravestones. Once you clean them, sometimes you can see them better, the inscriptions better, but it makes it harder to read. So I'm hoping this will show up on camera like it does in person. But basically, the sun here is behind the stone, making the entire front surface of the stone in the shade. So what you can do is take a sunshade from your car or a big mirror, and you're going to aim it at the sun, reflect the light back onto the stone, and then take your picture. So that way the sun is creating a reflection and shading those inscriptions so you can read it better. Hope that makes sense.
And I've included some helpful links. There's also handouts over there that has some helpful links for you. Just remember that anything you can do to preserve our historic cemeteries will help, but just keep long-term preservation as the main focus and the main goal, and do no harm. I highly, again, recommend you visit the AHC website and the Cemetery Conservators website before you begin any sort of cemetery preservation project. You can also email me if you have additional questions. And the the first link up there is to a gravestone cleaning video that is on the Hunt Spring DAR website, and it is a step-by-step video of what to do and how to do it. That's what the video clips came from. So if you need a refresher before you head out to the cemetery, go to that website and watch the full video. And that's all I have. If anyone has any questions.